It's back to Premier League action for Norwich City this weekend, thankfully, after Tuesday night's nightmare at Crawley, getting knocked out of the League Cup by a League Two team. But that's in the past. We'll concentrate on the Premier League. This was the Norwich team that very narrowly were beaten by Chelsea at Carrow Road last weekend and impressed on the whole, despite losing 3-2. On the back of the defeat at Crawley, I don't think we can expect too much change, particularly with Tim Close's knee injury picked up during that game. We're, of course, still waiting to hear how serious that is, but Daniel Farke has warned it could be the end of Tim's season, which would be a massive blow. Christoph Zimmermann did play 55 minutes in Crawley, but he did come off with a slight back and hip issue as well, so you would have thought Grant Hanley keeps his place in central defence and gets another chance to impress in the top flight. He's also got a recall to the Scotland squad this week. So the other players to have played in the cup game, Ben Godfrey played about an hour because he came on for Tim Closer. Emi Buendia played most of the second half, and Max Aarons did play the end as a substitute as well. Looking at West Ham's team then, this was the team that won 3-1 at Watford last weekend. Similar shape to Norwich, and you'll notice they've got a £45 million striker up front in Sebastian Haller, but we'll come on to him a little bit later because that is probably a name that you will recognise from Norwich history as well. They've got a former Norwich Player of the Season in their squad in Robert Snodgrass. Him and Jack Wilshere both played in their League Cup game on Tuesday night, which was a 2-0 win against a League Two side, Newport, away from home. Michael Antonio injured his hamstring in that game. He has been in England squads in the past. He looks a big doubt for the game. He's due to have scans ahead of the match. Javier Hernandez, Mexico international, former Manchester United of course. He is over his injury problem though and will be available for the game, Manuel Pellegrini has said. Looking at strengths and weaknesses then, dribbling is something that West Ham appear to be good at. Taking a look at the stats on whoscored.com, only 4 teams are averaging more than their 12.3 per game so far. And this is a slightly odd one. Shots. 24% of their shots have been from inside the 6-yard box so far this season. That's more than anyone else. Norwich only 6%. Now, that might seem as an oddity in terms of Norwich so good at getting their shots in close to goal, and that's where Teemu Pukki's bread and butter is to a certain extent. But inside the penalty area, Norwich are averaging 70% of their shots being inside, which tallies with their style, and that's the most in the division so far, and West Ham is only 48%, which is one of the lowest. So perhaps we've got two similar styles in terms of team here. When you look at the passing stats, they're not too dissimilar, although Norwich are averaging higher in terms of possession and pass completion. At the moment, we are only 3 games into the season, so averages are still in their infancy, really. In terms of weaknesses, only Crystal Palace are averaging lower than the 9.7 shots per game that West Ham have had so far this season. Norwich slightly better than that with 11 per game. However, they are averaging 6 on target a game, so they're pretty accurate with their shooting, and that's only slightly lower than Norwich so far. Both conceded quite a few goals. Norwich on 8, and West Ham are one of 3 teams who've conceded 7 so far, and that's because they both had difficult opening games. West Ham lost 5-1 at home to Manchester City, and of course Norwich lost 4-1 at Liverpool on the opening night. But as I say, it's still early, so these stats are still taking shape. And in terms of the key man, Sebastian Haller, I mentioned him earlier, £45 million signing from Frankfurt this summer. He had a prolific spell in the Bundesliga and was supposedly close to getting call-ups to the France squad last season. West Ham had brought him in over the summer and he scored his first 2 goals last weekend in a 3-1 win at Watford. But you may remember that he did also come very close to joining Norwich in the January of 2016 when Alex Neil was still in charge. The legend has it that he had actually flown into Norwich for talks, but saw the training facilities at Colney well before the redevelopment which we've seen at the training centre recently, and wasn't impressed with what he saw and went back to Holland, where he was playing for Utrecht and impressing at the time. So he's going to be one to watch out for at the London Stadium on Saturday.